If you were to ask someone about music, what they like, what really stands out about their favorite works, in almost every instance they will cite a melody, a famous theme. Or how about a good tune, which we all enjoy, is the main element of music that most of us respond to. Or maybe a person would cite a motif, a piece of a melody, a few iconic notes. Occasionally, a person might mention a distinctive rhythm, another basic element of music to which we physically respond. Or maybe it's some aspect of orchestration, like the flute, oboe, and clarinet bird calls in Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. In order, that was nightingale, quail, and cuckoo for any ornithologist who might be listening. Or in terms of orchestration, how about the whack of the guillotine blade and the bouncing head in Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique? And once in a great while, someone might mention another major element of music, and that's harmony, like the shift from the major chord to the minor in the Fate motive of Mahler's great Sixth Symphony. It's the same sort of thing that Richard Strauss does in the famous opening of Also sprach Zarathustra, where he goes from major to minor, and back to major. But these are all isolated, specific examples. I'd be willing to bet that nobody, not one, would mention the one basic element of music that governs everything else. So important, so all-encompassing that we rarely even think about it. And that is the form, the structure, the architecture of the music, where all these individual elements we've listed are organized and assembled for us as we listen. And this is how we comprehend and process music as it moves through time, whether it's a 5-minute overture or a 90-minute symphony by Mahler. By its form, structure, its architecture, rarely noticed on a conscious level, which is as it should be, since well-constructed music flows logically, seamlessly, organically. All art has form and shape. A painting or a photograph draws the eye with light, shadow, color, texture, balance of objects, and this is what guides our emotional response to it. More pertinent to music would be the written word, a novel, a short story, a screenplay, all of which unfold through time as we experience them. There's a sequencing of events that holds our attention and hopefully delivers the goods, dramatically, emotionally, intellectually, by the time we've finished. And all great art does this. And now, our encounter with the great architects of music will begin with two towering masters of the art form, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Franz Joseph Haydn. You know Mozart. And with Mozart, we find ourselves in the midst of this amazing period in history we call the classical era, the late 18th century, which developed out of the great Baroque period, which more or less ended with the death of Johann Sebastian Bach in 1750. It's very considerate of him to die right in the middle of the century, since it helps us keep our history in order. And for the next 30 years, give or take, many composers reacted against the complexity, the cerebral quality, and the often dense textures that define the late Baroque style. Music such as this. Amazing, profoundly brilliant music by the great J.S. Bach, his Brandenburg Concerto No. 2 from 1721. And you heard that joyous, supercharged rhythmic movement that propels the music. The rapid passage work that serves as the melodic material. And this combination of melody and rhythm keeps going in an almost mechanical way until the movement ends. We often refer to this Baroque device as motor rhythm, and it was a dominant convention of the time. So, considering the essential unity or sameness of the music, how does Bach structure it? How does he delineate things so that we can follow the music and keep it in order as we listen? Well, briefly, the main theme in the key of F major is divided into two parts. The first being, etc. The second part being, etc. Then Bach repeats both parts of this theme in another key, the closely related key of C major. And ultimately, he will vary things by moving into different keys or harmonic areas, etc. There are many definite markers and signposts to delineate the music. But there's no denying that it's written as a big block of sound and texture, exquisitely designed as it is. But times were changing, and composers of the post-Baroque era were experimenting now. Bach's own sons, 3 of whom became famous, were each finding their own way to follow in Dad's footsteps, not by imitating him, but by forging their own style in this new, diverse musical world. And be aware that all of these changes in music were being driven by the tides of history, that is, what was happening in society at the time. There is an excellent book published in 1972, a very influential one by Charles Rosen, entitled The Classical Style, in which he carefully, painstakingly follows the development of music during the last half of the 18th century, the reaction against the complexities of Baroque music that resulted in the galant style, as we call it, light, pleasing, rather superficial music, perfectly suited for royal, easy listening amidst the splendor of their Rococo palaces. And Mr. Rosen demonstrates how the order, clarity, and logic of the Age of Enlightenment influenced artistic expression, especially music, its overall tone, its melodies, harmonies, its much lighter, cleaner textures, streamlined rhythms, but perhaps most importantly, its structure, the form, the architecture of the music, the way in which larger works can be articulated and balanced. Now, again, compare this to our enjoyment of a good story, a novel, or a screenplay, and the basic tried and true structure, beginning, middle, and end, the sacred trinity of drama. And when it comes right down to it, we all expect and hope for the same sense of structure and balance that delivers the goods as we listen to music. And so a new musical form now emerges in the classical era to showcase this sense of order, clarity, and balance in music. We call it the sonata form. And the sonata, it's a generic word from Italian which just means music that is played as opposed to music that is sung. Sonata form, and we'll get into it in detail in the first official episode of this series. But I'll mention now that the sonata form was so popular and effective because it also had a distinct beginning, middle, and end, which we refer to as the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation. And the most popular and exciting vehicle which utilizes sonata form is that iconic thing we call the orchestral symphony. That was the very first symphonic utterance by the 9-year-old Mozart, written in 1765. Symphony, a generic term from the Greek meaning simply sounding together. And during this post-Baroque period, a symphony meant different things to different people. Most symphonies or sinfonias of the day were actually what we now call overtures. They were short works, maybe 7 or 8 minutes, and usually in 3 distinct sections called movements. And there were hundreds, thousands of these short symphonies written during this period, some of them, though not many, as delightful as this little gem. The Symphony No. 4 in F major by the fine English composer William Boyce, written around 1760, and still very much a part of the Baroque style, as you heard. And gradually, the classic model of the symphony as we know it, longer works for orchestra of 4 separate movements, became the standard model which inspired some of the most magnificent artistic creation this planet has ever known. And so, with all of this in mind, let's begin to explore and examine some of the wonders of our repertoire, beginning with one of history's most awe-inspiring composers, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, our first architect of music.